Rather than fighting against the crappy education they're getting and targeting their professors, college kids are now taking on unarmed statues. Well, not quite sure who's going to win that battle. I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie, and this is the Dr. Duke Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Duke Show, the only program that keeps you educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses via the world. Today, we're looking at the bad, rotten, worm-eaten fruit of decades of bad education policy as young, critically ignorant Americans demand every statue and monument that has anything to do with slavery that actually is older than they are be torn down, even if the people being censored actually fought for their cause. And that says it all, Katie, right? That these kids are so historically ignorant, they are so conscientiously dumbed down, they are so intellectually lazy that a statue's a statue.
But here's the thing. If all this white guilt that is happening, right, you must say all of your grievances, everything that you've ever done wrong, you must air out to the public before like Black Lives Matter, anyone will accept you. Well, before they tear down these statues, they should air out, they should say every historical fact they know about that statue. And then the statues would never have to be torn down because they know nothing about them. And that's what's so just incendiary about
Here's
this
a little
whole
dirty
thing.
secret about white liberal progressives. They don't feel guilty about anything. You're supposed to feel guilty.
Yes.
I'm supposed to be guilty, not them. Because who is it that's primarily tearing down these statues? Young, college-age morons, black and white. And so this idea of white guilt, it's white rage. What you call white guilt is actually white rage. It's white rage against our culture, our history, our monuments, our statues, our paintings, our books. And the irony of this white rage, as opposed to white guilt should make you humble. It should make you think twice about doing anything because of your privilege. No. These guilty little white college kids they're literally torching everything. That's not guilt. That's not humility. That's not atonement. That's not peace. That's white rage. And white rage is fueled by ignorance and bad education, which our university professors are giving these kids with both fists.
Well, and there are the doers, the ragers, but then there are the sayers, and that's who Eduardo Naret of Campus Reform, who's a digital reporter, actually talked to a bunch of these college kids and got their thoughts on who should remove statues, if they should be removed.
Would you support even going as far as, Washington and Jefferson because they had slaves?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's not really, for my opinion, really. I think it's supporting the people who have been oppressed by this ideology and what their voices say. And if it's part of their healing process, then I'm supportive of it.
Why would you support someone who has a racist past? And why would you see that for young kids to see?
What about a politician who maybe a recent politician who has a bad history with women, and they're politicians who worked with segregationists in the 60s to keep the country segregated, and they have buildings named after them? Should people like that be? Should they have their names removed from current buildings, and should they have any statues removed as well?
Yeah, 100%.
Yes, I agree.
I think re-examining wouldn't be a bad idea.
Yeah, I think if you've ever sexually assaulted anyone, then you have no right to be as big as you are and have your name anywhere, to be honest.
And it doesn't surprise me in the least that they're all women. Yep, I'm going to say it. That if you had interviewed that many number of boys, there would have been a greater diversity opinion than you find in the young female population of this country. And a lot of that has to do with the toxic effects of feminism that's permeated every aspect of our campus and of our culture, right? Critical thinking is not something that feminists do. Critical thinking is something that you have to take away to promote academic feminism in the schools these days. It's all about the men and made patriarchy bad, everything else good. The definitiveness notice what you had with those young girls. And look, I want to be very clear. Would there have been a lot of young men just as stupid, just as superficial, just as glib? Yes. Yeah. But I do think there would have been a broader range of response than you got there. The answer, the shock answer of all those girls, yep, get rid of it. And so it is absolutely shallow thinking. So it doesn't matter. And literally this is what we've told kids. Everybody who lived in this world anybody who's white in this world, in this country, is racist. Everybody who's white participates in white supremacy. What does that mean then for every single human moment of culture in America going back to 1619? Everything, all the time, everywhere is racist. So what are they doing? They're raging against what they've been taught to rage against. Let's burn the whole thing down. Let's forget progress, forget legislation, forget systemic reasons why we've moved farther and farther away from that. Forget the long march of civil rights, human rights, gay rights, women's rights. Forget the march of those things through primarily Western systems and structures. Forget it all. Burn it down and then start with what? So you got a lot of anger and a lot of rage, and you got a lot of, yep. Those are the same young girls, I have to point it out, who if you said, would you be all right eradicating government in the name of a pacifistic anarchy? Yep. Even though the idea that something like that is completely a red herring and doesn't exist. It's an oxymoron. These are the same young girls. Anything, the one in the red, right? Anything that can be done to make the feelings of oppressed people feel better should be done. There you have it, right? Because feelings know no institutions.
We're going to talk over in what's happening in London, actually. The Royal Holloway University of London Library has stated that it's going to remove certain books in an effort to combat structural racism. And then they apologize for not doing it sooner.
Yeah, you knew this had to happen. If you could pull down statues and burn other people's property, if you can loot and throw rocks and bricks at people till they're almost dead and no one's going to do anything, then it would be logical that you have to get rid of books. In fact, books are much greater problems than statues.
Yes, they
Statues
are.
Don't speak. Most utterly ignorant kids today don't know what they're looking at. Again, it's why the statue of Matthias Baldwin in Philadelphia was graffitoed, right? Here's a guy who fought for 30 years as an abolitionist to get rid of slavery, but he's gone. It's why the statue of Lincoln the Emancipator in is it New York? No, Boston, that has to be moved out, right? Because and yesterday we find out that the Theodore Roosevelt statue outside one of the New York museums has to be pulled down because it has a big horse statue, equestrian statue of Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt, and it's got a Native American and an African American, slightly smaller scale. The implication being Teddy Roosevelt was somebody who fought for those people, but because they're not the same size or bigger than he is, has to go too. And if you're going to play this game, books are much more dangerous. And the list of decolonized books, I guarantee you, how do you have the Odyssey? Or how do you have any Greek literature? And then you certainly can't have Roman literature. And then, of course, you can't have Western literature. You can't have American literature. You can't have English literature. I mean, really, if this is what you're doing, if you have to pull down statues even of good guys from 600 years ago, then you're going to have to pull books even from good guys 600 years ago off the shelves.
Well, and that's what Nigel Faraj, who's a very loud, outspoken politician and a broadcaster, and he actually put on Twitter, he's also the one, by the way, who led the charge for Brexit, in case you've heard of him before. He said on Twitter, "The book burning has started. This fanaticism is very dangerous." Short, sweet, and to the point, and it is absolutely true because that's what's happening over in America too. We're actually doing statues right now because we can see them. We actually don't have kids go into libraries right now, so that yet. They would actually have to know where the library is and then get through the doors and be like, "Oh, what's these things called books here?" Instead, they see the statues. Those are just easier. But we had NPR, which is a publicly funded institution here. And they have said that Americans need to decolonize your bookshelf. In a tweet, they wrote, "In essence, decolonizing your bookshelf is about actively resisting and casting aside the colonialist ideas of narrative, storytelling, and literature that have pervaded the American psyche for so long." And they retweeted that from someone who's named at It's Juan Love. It's Juan Vidal, who's Rap Dad. He's a Latino coming of age. He wrote a Latino coming of age story about family identity, representation, and aging, and whatever. And
so the Latino,
that's who they're
Latino
tweeting
wrote
about.
a Western style narrative book that's allowed to stand, but you got to get rid of the rest of them, right?
And NPR supports
Gotcha.
Juan.
And NPR, who we're paying for, is supporting literally book burning, figurative book burning. And I go one step further with this. This idea is so perverse, right? That don't read the books on your shelf. Get rid of them. Don't let anybody else read the books on your shelf. Get rid of them because they participate in the patriarchy. They participate in racism and colonialism. Get rid of those books and replace them with politicized books that will teach you. We'll give you the book. We'll let you know what books you can read and still be considered a good citizen. Does that not chill your bones? It should chill your. And the fact that you've got museum curators telling people online how to pull down statues. You've got archaeologists whose job it is to protect monuments and historical artifacts, telling people how to destroy monuments and historical artifacts, and you've got librarians telling people how to destroy and remove offending books. Do you understand what's happening here? This is fascism now. This is not just brown shirts in the street misguided by an ideology. This is being co-opted from the inside. Librarians, museum curators, archaeologists, college professors, National Public Radio is telling rabid mobs of uneducated kids to burn, loot, and pillage. This is not an outside movement. It is 100% inside. This is a big-time government movement being supported by so-called professionals. Quit calling it a grassroots movement. Quit pretending it's not a deep state action. Quit pretending that people like George Soros and radical globalist anarchists aren't funding this thing to the top of to the nth degree, because they are.
Here's a headline for you. Half of the Ivy Leagues have lowered their admission standards. And I guess I'm not shocked by this, other than to say only half? Because really, at this point, pretty much all of them have lowered their standards. Cornell University, Dartmouth College, and Columbia University, and now the University of Pennsylvania has joined in. They actually became the fourth Ivy League school to amend their standardized testing policies for this upcoming school year with regards to undergraduate admissions, and it's all claiming to be because of the corona, but we know that's not the case.
These bastions of Marxism and socialism and social justice and radical equity are actually lowering their standards, not because they're concerned about your lower achieving kids' education, but because they want the money. Notice what they haven't lowered? Tuition prices.
Oh,
in some cases, a number of universities have raised tuition and fees. So this is not about equity. It's about we need your less achieving kid, more often than not coming from low income families. We'll let them in and they're going to pay more for our education. Here's my thinking. If you're taking kids who otherwise you wouldn't, otherwise kids who would not qualify for this Ivy League Brahmin education, if that's the case, shouldn't you lower your fees? Look, we're going to take you, even though you weren't our first, second, or third choice. But we're going to take you, and we're going to give you less. We can't give you more. We can't have our esteemed Oxford-educated faculty teaching down to you. That's what they're going to do. Our faculty will be engaging only 1/4 of their brilliant minds, to educate you idiots. So shouldn't we pay 1/4 of the tuition? Look, the kids you're taking now, if you are the rigorous schools you pretend to be, couldn't possibly get through unless you dumb everything down. So there ought to be a dumb tax placed on universities, right? Call it a value non-added tax, a VNAT tax, right? For every lower grade point average, 1 point, for every lower standardized test, now that you've gotten rid of them altogether, for every lower rank, step down in class rank, you have to prorate tuition, right? We're not taking the best of the best. We're taking the worst of the rest because we need your money. And if we're going to pay all that money, you ought to kick back to us in exponential amounts how much we're not going to get an Ivy League education. Give us the money back. Start paying us. Watch how quickly, by the way, they would rediscover their standards if you did that.
I just want a coffee mug that says, not best of the best, worst of the rest.
Right.
That's what you, not best of the best, worst of the rest. That's who we get here at Dr.
I went to Dartmouth, and all I got was this damn coffee mug, coffee spelled wrong, right?
Yeah, got it.
But you know what you still got? Guess what you're going to have? You're
Piece
gonna
of
have
paper.
You'll have an Ivy degree.
Yeah,
Ivy League, and you'll also have Ivy League debt, and you're still not going to be able to do anything.
Well,
there you go.
That's what it means to be an Ivy
Unless
League.
it means become part of the political class and screw everybody else for the rest of your career.
Have fun doing that, because that is what they'll do. Well, just so everyone's aware, this is how you know you got a scam artist. The Dean of Admissions, Eric Ferda, for the University of Pennsylvania, says that they're going to evaluate students on an individual basis, consistent with our belief in a comprehensive whole person review process. Scammer. That's a scammer to the nth degree.
I.e., you have a 4th grade reading level. You couldn't do math you couldn't spell math if I spotted the MAT. You couldn't do that, right? You know nothing about history or culture. You don't like to read books, and you don't like to actually study. But you're a fun party girl who happens to have a half Puerto Rican father, and you like fashion, and you like watching the OC, right? The OC, watching the OC.
wow.
But we need that kind of diversity on college campuses. We need flighty little bimbos who don't like school. We need them as much as we need scholars.
Will it be Visa or MasterCard? That's the main
Cha-ching.
question at the end. Will it be Visa or MasterCard? I guess we'll accept American Express if we have to.
I got a degree from the Cha-ching program of racial studies
I was
from
gonna say that's somehow
Dartmouth
racist.
College.
That's racist.
The
You know it is.
Cha-ching, right? See, there you go.
That's-
Well, and ironically, the Asians are the only ones who aren't going to be let in because of this.
This
They're
is
all
so
still getting
true.
in on merit. What a crazy world we live in.
Time for some real education. The Roman aqueduct was a channel used to transport fresh water to highly populated areas. Though earlier civilizations in Egypt and India also built aqueducts, the Romans improved on the structure and built an extensive and complex network across their territories. Evidence of aqueducts remain in parts of modern-day France, Spain, Greece, North Africa, and Turkey. Besides great feats of engineering, they are also architectural works of art.
Why is it that when you introduce this section, all of a sudden you become Lovey Howell from Gilligan's Island? Anyway, yes, Roman architectural aqueducts. We're back on our theme of absolutely functional engineering that is in and of itself an amazing artistic achievement. Take a look at some of these pictures there. There is a typical Roman aqueduct. And what they did is, they use the columns. You see the columns there. You could argue that the Greek contribution to architecture was the column, a remarkable thing in all their variety and diversity and all their usefulness in building places, temples like the Parthenon on the Acropolis. Here you have the Romans who took the columns and added the arch. And all of a sudden, a column, right, where the force of all the weight on top of it goes down a straight line, which limits the ability to build on it, which is why Greek monuments, by the way, like the Acropolis, like the Parthenon, are so small when you see them. The thing that shocks people when they go to the Parthenon is how tiny it is. But you see what the Romans did. The Romans were able to engineer monumentally by having those arches between the columns where the force of the weight on top is actually dispersed all the way down the long length of that arch. And so without the Romans, the Romans gave us indoor plumbing. Almost most cities in Roman Empire, all across the Roman Empire, had literally water in all their cities, fresh flowing water. And if you go back to show some of these other pictures of these monuments. That on the left there you see the trough that would be on the top of the monument. And it's just gently sloping for miles and 50, 60, 100 miles. And that water comes right from melting snow or other systems of water up in the hills of the mountains, and it comes cascading on down oftentimes right into people's living rooms. So it's an amazing thing. And the Romans, they tried to go around rocks and mountains if they had to, but they were not averse to digging through them. And imagine digging through a mountain without the kind of dirt and rock moving machines that we now have. It's pretty staggering. You could see that very often most of the aqueducts were underground. When they came to mountains, rather than building them up and down, it wouldn't work, right? If any time over the course of the aqueduct's progress into a city, it had to go up instead of down, the water would end, right? The water could not climb. But wherever necessary, you could see, and most of the aqueduct was buried below ground. And you see the cisterns there, and then you got a valley there, and you can see where, in that valley, that beautiful aqueduct spans the bridge. Go to the next picture. You can see the chute there through the water where it comes, and then you can see in the picture on the right just how elaborate and beautiful they are, right? I mean, not just in terms of the way they look, their aesthetic, which is gorgeous, by the way. Much better looking than this kind of suspension bridge we have, I think. Much more elegant. Now, again, it wasn't for foot travel, it wasn't for horse and carriage. It was very pragmatic, but really gorgeous too. And you can see there the brickwork, the stonework. You see what kind of people the Romans were, right? That when then they, besides being just incredibly innovative, whether it was architecture or engineering or 1,000 other things that the Romans did extremely well, there was always this sense that they did it in a monumental, dramatic style. On the Dr. Duke Show, in Instant Classics, we did the Pantheon. We've looked at that before. And we will look at other really feats of Roman engineering and artistry brought together through that particular genius there. And you can see those aqueducts all the way across the Roman Empire, from England all the way almost to India. And the interesting thing, from about 300 BC to about 280, about 500 years, 5 centuries, all the aqueducts that we see, the ones that remain and the ones that have fallen, were more or less constructed by the Empire of the Romans.
All right. As always, you can follow us on Facebook and Parler. And if you have a question for our Friday Q&A, visit freedomproject.com/askduke or send us a message on social media. Now, we're going to wrap things up with our fun fact of the day. In the United States, the largest and most expensive aqueduct is called the Central Arizona Project. It's 336 miles from the source near Parker, Arizona, to Phoenix and to Tucson. And California's aqueduct system runs from the Colorado River.
Yeah, but in California, the only thing it transports is fruits and nuts. And that's going to do it for us this show. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie. Until next time, stay educated, my friends.